everyone, welcome back to Winging It. We're in week 3 of our February panel, and today I thought we would carry on with our snowdrops theme, and we've been looking at fragments through February, and we've also been looking at those signs in nature that better things are coming as a way of sort of getting ourselves through these dreary winter months, or coping if you're in the southern hemisphere with the end of the summer and the onset of those wetter and darker months of the year. So in week 1 we made our slow stitched area where we wove our strips of fabric and then slow stitched our running stitch lines over the top, and in places we created some little crosses over here. And then last time we did our silk shaded snowdrop panel, and we've just appliqued that on to the surface there and sort of roughed up the edges a little bit. So what I've got today is a bunch of fragments of cloth. So I've got 2 shades, I don't know if the camera's picking it up particularly well, 2 shades of green starry silk here, and then I've got some of my paler fabrics. So if I show you what I've got here, I've got different textures. So this is the hair fabric, which is a sort of shell grey oystery colour with a sort of off-white print on it. And then I've got some Japanese yarn dye fabric there that's a sort of hazy, a bit like a gingham really, but it's kind of hazy. All of the colours sort of blend into each other. This is a little bit of my sheet fabric that is lining my February piece. Then I've got some wool felt, it's a wool blend felt. Then I've got just a bit of cotton, might be a poly cotton, that's got these little bumps on it, raised polka dots. And then this is a little bit of silk that is very carefully pressed it. This was actually a fragment of the leftover fabric from one of my bridesmaids' dresses. So this, I celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary last year, yeah, 2023, and so this has survived. I've still got a fair amount of it left. This has survived for a quarter of a century now. So what I've done is just pressed it onto some heat and seal. That's it, and I've just covered my heat and seal in just some little samples, patches of fabrics. And I thought what we could do is create a different kind of snowdrop just to sort of sit in this space here. So we want to sort of blend across from one side to the other, and I want to overlay something a little bit patchworky over here. So we're going to make a scrappy applique snowdrop, carrying on the snowdrop theme. So we are going to build up our shapes, and I think let's go with the satin. So what I'm going to do is on the back, I want this to be a decent size. I'm going to create my inner part of the snowdrop like that. So I want a sort of Star Trek bad shape. So it's just an upside down rounded V, and then or you could do like a W rounded like that. And so I'm just going to cut that out, and we're just going to build this up piece by piece out of just fragments of cloth. So I did say I was going to show you a couple of ways of making snowdrops. This is another way. I'm so sorry if you don't like snowdrops. I hope everybody likes snowdrops because they are just beautiful. So I just need to, I'm just going to rest it on the surface first of all. okay, and maybe I want it this way, I don't know. I'm not going to attach it down yet. So I've got my backing paper, and that's going to help me form my banana shapes. So what I want is a banana shape. Now these are going to be reversed, so I'm doing my right hand banana, but this will actually be my left hand banana. So if you I've just realised that some of you might be thinking, what on earth is she talking about? If you watched last week's video, you will know that I showed you how to draw a snowdrop, and we talked about these being banana shaped, these petals that overhang. So that's what I'm talking about. So this is in my hair fabric. That's H-A-R-E, not H-A-I-R. I don't want you to think I'm using fabric made out of hair, although I suppose wool is fabric made out of hair. It's not as disgusting an idea as one might think. And I'm just going to peel off the backing, and we're just going to sit that on the surface there. And then I think I have actually just put that upside down, so what I didn't account for is that it doesn't actually matter which way round your banana pieces go, because you can turn them upside down. So let's put it like that. We want a piece that comes out of here, so again I'm going to use I want a slightly darker piece, maybe this one will work, because I want my petal that comes down here like that, and I don't need much more of that because it's going to go underneath. So this one is a sort of V shape, and I'm flattening off the top. It would go all the way up to the top of the flower, but we don't need that. So if you don't know what heat and seal is, it's very much like Bondweb. It's a fusible fabric adhesive, and it's double-sided. So you iron it onto the fabric, and then you peel off the backing, and that reveals the glue, and then you can iron it onto your background that you want. So you can see I'm using here my middle section to help me work out the sizes and shapes. So this is where it's going to start, and I want it to end about there. So we're going to do a second banana shape like that, and I'm doing this out of the felt, just because I want a little bit of texture. You could do it all in felt. I do love felt. Very forgiving fabric. And I'm using my paper scissors because obviously the backing is paper, and so although I'm cutting through fabric, I don't want to blunt my embroidery scissors cutting through the paper. Can't get the backing off this one. There we go. So I've got a little snowdrop petal like that. Excellent. Right, so now we want our top top, and I think it's going to take the whole of the width. Maybe I can do it over the join between those two fabrics. I think that might work, and then I get two colours. Trying to stay in shot. You can see how quickly I'm doing this. I am totally improvising this. I haven't tried it out. I'm just hoping for the best. I quite like that. I think it needs to be shorter. Like that. Right, so I've decided it needs to come down. It's too close to the top. So this is why we didn't start gluing it down. We're just positioning it at the moment. Something like that. Then our little lid goes on the top, like that. And then I'm probably going to couch a stem, I think. So we can use, let's see what happens if we use wool. You can't see it, that's what happens. Right, where's my paper? Maybe we need to do the same again. Or maybe, let's try something different. Let's make a thin strip of this. Oh no. Oh no, I've just committed the cardinal sin. I'll have to sharpen those. Right, now I reckon when I take the backing off, did you see what I did? I used my embroidery scissors and cut through paper. Oh no. Now I reckon I could make that bend around, and I like that better. Maybe I can't make it bend around. Maybe we make it out of fragments by cutting little pieces that we can put in different directions, like that. There we go. Liking that. And then I want to make a couple of leaves, so we're going to go straight into our greens. And we want some long, thin, tapering leaves. So I'm not planning, I'm just cutting. I'm letting my scissors do the work. Let's put that one there. This is the roughest kind of applique you can imagine. Right, the glue's not come off with that. There we go. Put our first leaf there, and then we can make a second leaf out of our remaining . And again we've got two whether that one needs to be a little bit smaller. Just not sure about the shade of green. Maybe if we put that one there like that, and then we can put this one over the top. Yeah, I prefer that. Yeah, let's do that. That was easier. Right, so now we're going to think about positioning. So let me tell you what I'm not liking. I'm not liking that this green stem is sitting on top of the same shade of green. So I think we need to get some kind of mixed in the sea. So it was too high before, and now I think it's too far over to the right. So too far over to the left, crikey, get a grip. That's better. Right, so what I want is a bit of cloth as a press cloth. Right, let's take these pieces off because that stem is in the right place now. So I've just got a little bit of my sheet, and I'm just going to press over the top. So I'm using a press cloth because I don't want glue on my iron. If I showed you the foot of my iron or the plate of my iron, you would be horrified because I keep catching glue. But I also don't want things to move, and it's also silk. So I'm trying to give it a chance. There we go. See, all that glue, see how that peeled off? That's because there's glue on just showing through, and I don't want that glue on my iron. I quite like that that's got a raw edge there. So now I'm going to put this leaf on. So we're just going to build this up bit by bit. There we go. And then this one goes over the top, and again I really like that double layer, trying to make sure it shows. Let's put it there. Stop faffing about. So do follow the instructions on whatever fusible webbing you use. With heat and seal, you are supposed to smooth the iron across the surface when you press it down, and it's a really quick press to attach the heat and seal to the fabric, and then you press it a little bit longer to fuse it to your backing. So, right, our flower then, we need to build this up layer by layer. So I just want to make sure that we put things in the right place. So we want to put that there. That's going to just go underneath. I want that kind of there, and then that's going to go there, and that's going to go there. Right, okay. That's going to go on last. Right, that's in the right place now. So I'm just going to get it. Like that. And then we put this one on. So I want that there. And that definitely needs a press cloth over the top of it because it's silk again. And then we're going to put our banana shaped petals on. So let's start with this one. The key is making sure that you're always putting your pieces glue side down. Here's our second banana shaped petal. That's the one made out of felt. Now felt doesn't tend to stick particularly well because you've got obviously the thickness of the felt that you've got to get through before the heat can get to the glue. And I'm a bit higher up than I'd intended there. Rats, thought I got that. There we go. It's all right. There we go. So I thought we could add some decorative stitch to our pieces, and I want to be really careful that I don't overwhelm some of the features here, so I don't want to mess about with this frayed edge because I think it's really pretty, but I thought we could have a bit of a go at doing some stitching over the surface, and I thought I don't want to mess about too much with this lovely frayed edge that's running down it, but I want to add some stitching that is going to be both decorative and functional, because you know me, I don't entirely trust bond web or heat and seal. I just feel like it's going to let go of my fabric at some point, and so stitching makes me feel more secure. So I thought we could add a little bit of maybe feather stitch. So if I just do a couple of stitches show you the effect. So it's a little bit like fly stitch, but a bit jazzier, because rather than putting a stalk after every V, you use the bottom of one V to make the top of the next V. So you get this lovely sort of, hope the camera can pick it up, this lovely sort of interlocking V shape. So let's see if I can show you how to do it. So you bring your thread up top left on the stitch. Let's see if I can bring it up a bit closer, you might be able to see it better. Here we go. It's because it's green on green. So we bring our thread up at the top left if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, you probably want to bring it up at the top right. And we're going to hop directly across and tape our needle down horizontally across from where the thread came up. It's probably a bit big. Let's move it in a little bit. And we're going to pull our thread through until we get a little loop like that. And then I want to come down in the middle. So I want to come down visually in the middle of those 2 points. So I want to find the centre, come down a stitch length, and my needle's at the back, and that's where I want to bring my needle up. And I want to make sure that I'm catching my needle inside that loop of thread that I've made, and that means that when I pull through, that loop is caught on the working thread and gets pulled into a V shape. And if I was doing fly stitch now, I would do a straight stitch down and rock my needle to come out to start the next V. But with feather stitch, I want to immediately go to another V shape. So now my thread is coming up on the right, and I want to hop across horizontally to the left and take my needle down on the left like that, and that creates another loop. And then I want to bring my needle up a little way down in between those 2 points where the thread comes out and goes back into the fabric, catch that loop and pull through. Now I've just pulled through a little bit of fluff from my wadding. It's not the end of the world, we can sort that out. If I pull it, it's just going to get worse. So now I'm going to hop across to the right and we start the process again. So over to the right, bring my needle up a little way down in between those 2 points and inside the loop, pull through, and then we're going to hop across to the left, take the needle down, rock it forwards so that it comes up inside that loop of thread and pull through, and you get these lovely interlocking V shapes that work all the way down. So I'm going to work along my leaf, and now that I've got into a wider section, I can let that frayed edge shine a little bit. This stitching is going to help my fabric pieces, my little bits of applique, stay in place regardless of what I use this for. So I think this isn't like the quilt that we made last year. I don't think this is going to be in constant use and washed and whatever, but if you are making a book out of this, then you will be turning pages and they might be touched and you know, that kind of thing, and you don't want your bond webbed pieces or your heat and sealed pieces of applique to just work themselves loose over time. So I always like to put a little bit of stitching onto my applique, partly because I just like overstitching. I think there's something quite magical about it, but also because it's functional as well. It's another way that that fabric is attached, just to keep it safe. And you can use whatever stitches you like, so I'm going to show you 3 or 4 stitches that you can use. So we've got a little bit of a stitch sampler going on here. You can make your stitches totally even as well, and I think feather stitch looks beautiful when it's really even, but it also has an organic beauty when it's a little bit higgledy-piggledy like this. And because I'm stitching on a leaf, I don't mind it being a little bit more organic. So if I can just catch the light, hopefully you can see that. So when you got to the end, just unthreaded my needle. Keep doing it. It's because I've got such rough skin on my hands. Let's get a different needle. Quite a fine eye on that one. There we go. Once you've got to the end, all you do is hop over the point of that V and take your needle back down on the other side, and that puts a little anchor stitch in place to hold your final stitch down, and then you can secure your thread on the back in whatever way you prefer to do it. So there's a bit of feather stitch there. Let's get a different shade of green. This one is, I think this is a cotton thread. I do really like it. It's a more sort of earthy green, so it matches this one. It's a little bit more olivey than the previous thread, and it's a lot more matte as well, so it'll kind of recede a little bit. And what can we do on this one? Let's do some blanket stitch. So blanket stitch is a lovely edging stitch which you can use right along the edge. I'm going to come just inside the edge, I think, of mine, and it's made up of horizontals and verticals, so it's formed in a similar way to fly stitch and feather stitch. It's formed with a loop, but this time we're going to work it over a right angle. So I brought my thread up at the edge of my leaf, and I want to imagine a little box, a little square on my fabric, and I want to come across the square and down so that I'm diagonally opposite where my thread came up. So I'm going to use the edge of the leaf as my guide, and I'm going to take my needle down, pull through to create that loop again. Bit of a twisted loop, but it's a loop nevertheless. And then I want to come back up on that top left corner. So I've come up top left, I've gone down bottom right, and now I want to come up top right at the corner of that box, and again inside the loop and pull through, and that catches on a working thread. So if I turn that towards me, you can see that actually that's the beginning of fly stitch or feather stitch, but this time we're going to work it so that our horizontals form a line. So take my thread out of the way, and I'm going to find that box again, and I'm going to come down bottom right, so diagonally opposite from where my working thread is coming up, pull through to make a loop, and then I'm going to come up top right corner of my little box, inside the loop, and pull through. And so now we've got 2 stitches that form little right angles, and I'll just keep going in that same way So down and up inside the loop, pull through, and I've got my little blanket stitch. There you go. There's a bit of blanket stitch on that leaf. I've got a nice variegated one here. This might be nice. This is a DMC variegated 4045 if you're interested. It's quite a subtle variegation, and I do find with variegated threads, particularly if you're using stranded cotton like this is, DMC tends to change colour more frequently than anchor. So if you're stitching a large area where you only want slight variations, anchor is the way to go. But if you want a lot of changes fairly frequently, then you might want DMC. So on the stem I'm just going to put some chain stitch down the centre. So again, this is another loop stitch, very similar, but this time rather than opening up the top of your loop, we're going to take our needle back down at the same point where the thread came up and pull through to make a loop, and then we're going to take our needle along a little way, bring it up inside that loop, pull through, and you end up with a little teardrop shape just at the top. Of your line. So again, I've gone down at the same point, made the loop, brought my needle up inside that loop a little way along, and that forms a teardrop. You don't want to pull it through too tight because you will lose that teardrop shape. It'll just pull into a line, so you want to keep this one nice and gently tensioned. You don't want it loose because it won't sit quite right, but you don't want it tight because you'll just lose the shape of the stitch. You want to try and keep your stitches the same distance apart, and that'll give you a nice, neat and even finish. I hate it when you get like one stitch away and you don't really have enough thread. I always try and make it work. Really need a new piece of thread, that's far too short, but I'm determined not to. There we go. So different stitches there, and I need to think about where's my friction pen. We want to put our little green heart shape in here. I did look for some fragments of fabric that were the right shade of green, but I couldn't find any. Just going to flatten that out a little bit. So we want a little shape in here that's a little bit like what you get in a snowdrop, and I actually think let's get our light green back from last week just so we've got a little echo of it. So I'm going to try and use up this remnant of thread. We use most of it for we use the missing strands for our bit of green here. So I've got 5 strands left. Let's see if we can do it all in 5 strands. So I've got 2 strands here, just threading it up, and I think we could satin stitch this. Maybe we should try satin stitch. So this is very similar to what we did last week. I just want to make sure my threads are going to sit nicely. So I've brought my thread up there, and I'm going to take it down to the bottom of my shape, and if you wanted to you can back stitch around the outline, but I'm just going to go for it. And then we want to bring our needle up right next to that first stitch on the outside line of the shape, and then we're going to go back down at the bottom. So satin stitch is really thread hungry because you're making the stitch that it's full at its full length on the back and on the front. But you just don't get the same finish if you do a cheat satin stitch where you kind of ladder it and go down, come across a little way and go up. You just don't get the same finish, I don't think. But it is a way of doing it. So we just want to make sure that our stitches are lying really closely next to each other and that our threads are lying flat. And it doesn't have to be a perfect shape. We are making a snowdrop, so we can be a little bit more organic than perfection. But yeah, just try and get them all going in the same direction and sitting really closely next to each other. So when you're getting to the edge of your shape, it's really tempting to just try and cover more ground really quickly, but I don't recommend that you do. You have to just be patient because you could end up with a really beautiful bit of satin stitch. Do our burnishing thing again just to help our stitches sit nicely. You end up with really beautifully done satin stitch, and then it all goes a bit haywire just at the outer edge. And I tend to find that you always kind of need to do 1 or 2 stitches more than you think you should to get your, particularly with rounded shapes, just to get the shape right. So I'd be tempted to stop there, but I think it needs 1 more stitch, just a really little one, just to get that roundness. And then I can work back the other way. I'd also recommend starting in the middle of a shape with satin stitch rather than at the outside edge. It's much harder to get your angle right if you start with a small stitch. So you want to kind of find the place where you're going to make the longest stitch, and that's where you want to start. I'm very aware that some of you won't have done the snowdrop last week. I've been echoing my snowdrop, but I think if you did a different flower, you could have a go at stitching it in a different way. So I'm echoing my snowdrop but in a different technique, and that's basically the principle. So same flower, different technique. So if you did a different flower, maybe you are coming into sunflower season where you are, then do a different technique to create a sunflower. So we did silk shading last week, we're doing a bit of applique this week. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you create or come up with. If you want to, you don't have to echo your flower. You could use applique to create a different symbol of something that reflects life in the world where you are. So you might be coming into autumn and want to create some mushrooms or something like that. So I'm sure I will come to mushrooms later in the year. I do love fungi. I'm going to just do a little heart stitch here. So heart stitch, very similar to what we've done. Again, it's another loop stitch. So I've come up, I want to make a little heart that echoes this heart. So I've come up at the top and I want to take my needle down where the heart is going to dip in, and then I'm going to bring my needle out. I'm going to make a little kind of fly stitch out here. So I'm bringing my needle out so that I'm going to form that curve of the heart, and then I'm going to hop over, and when we pull through, that pulls our stitch into a little shallow V. And then I'm going to do the same again but going in the other direction. So I'm coming back up at the top of the heart, back down, and then I'm going to bring my needle out. Like that. Hop over. And that catches my stitch. That's my little snowdrop, that's my heart stitch. You can see it's a little heart shape. So that's my stitching on there, and let's have a think about what we want to do with our snowdrop. But what I think I'm going to do on this one is just a really simple running stitch around the outside edge of the shape. So I'm just inside the shape. Let's do some blanket stitch again, but this time we can lap it around the edge. So I'm going to start in the centre there, and I want to go down through the fabric and then come up right at the edge of that shape, and this is going to kind of outline it. So down at the edge, down inside the shape, up at the edge, and along the shape. And I think I'm going to backstitch around this inner petal here. So to do backstitch, I think we've done backstitch before, I'm just going to come in from the join. So I'm coming up a stitch length down from where I want my line to start, and I'm working back to the starting point of my line, and then I want to go along one stitch length so there's a gap between where my first stitch ended and where my needle is. So I'm leaving a gap, and then I'm going to come back and go back down right at the end of that first stitch. So along one stitch length, and then back to the end of my previous stitch. Along one stitch length and back to the end of my previous stitch. Let's do stem stitch because we learnt that last week. So I'm going to start at the top of my line. I'm going to go a stitch length along and rock my needle back to halfway along and pull through to make that little T shape. Then I'm going to take my thread back up over the top, come along a stitch length and go back to the end of that first stitch. Thread at the top, hook back to the previous stitch. And for this I think I'm going to do some French knots around it. So I'm going to start in the corner. If you remember, let's do it in this direction so you can see better what I'm doing. So pull the thread towards you, needle on the top of the thread, wrap a few times, needle back through the surface, and we want to pull gently on that working thread to keep it under tension, and we pull our thread through and that creates a little French knot. So I'm going to move along a little way. Hope you can see this. It's hard with the green on the green. So I'm going to make a little line of French knots around the edge of that shape. Really like that little outline of French knots. I don't know if I can make it. Let me just see if I can make it visible. There we go. Can you just about see that? No, it's out of focus. There we go. Hopefully you can just about see that. It's very hard because I've deliberately chosen a green to match the background. But I'll try and do some close-up photos. Right, so there we have our applique snowdrop for this week with our little stitch sampler over stitching. Lots of different very simple stitches that you can use for slow stitch. So it's taking shape. I've got one more video and we're going to fill in some of these spaces around here, so hopefully you will join me for our last February video to finish off our February panel. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that. Can't wait to see your applique flowers or mushrooms or whatever it is you're going to applique. Really looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Do share your work at #FSH Winging It 24, and if you don't want to share on Instagram, you can share to our little Facebook group which you can join. You don't have to pay anything, you just request to join, agree to the group rules, and I will approve you, and you can find a link to that in the description below. So have a great week making your applique addition to your panel, and I will see you very soon. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye.